In this new episode of the Dres Ring Space Station, we are gonna see the arrival of a lander for the crew to use and also the departure of its ferry stage. Hello and welcome everyone, I'm Pietro, and yeah, as I said, today we are gonna create, build and launch this new lander for the crew to use to land on Dres, and there's gonna be quite a mess during this video because I encountered the most bugs so far that I've ever encountered playing KSP2. We are at about 2 weeks from the release of the game, and we are about 1 week away from the release of the first patch that has been announced by the developers to be supposed to come out on the 16th of March. So yeah, everybody brace yourselves because we still have 1 week with the game in this condition, and who knows how many other bugs we are gonna find, and in this video we are gonna definitely see a few of them. Here you can see me developing the lander. I decided to put some solar panels that have not been used for now in this series, but I figured that since the lander is gonna stay outside of the rings when it lands on the surface of Dres, it may not be so affected by the imaginary space debris impact that are not modeled by the game. Otherwise I couldn't have built a space station there inside of the rings. But yeah, well, instead for the tug I decided to put the RTGs and also put an antenna to allow for communications. I still don't have a clear idea if antennas are required or not, because there are some situations in which the game requires me to have them and others instead in which there is no problem, so it decides randomly if they are needed or not. Here you can see me doing one of the biggest errors that I could have done, because placing non-physical part like those cubical structs there is one of the things that's gonna trigger a bug. It's gonna make our rocket literally fall apart on the launch pad, and that messed up also all the other rockets that I've built in this save for some reason, and so I had to restart, I had to reload save files and everything to try and correct the mess that was happening. Here I was managing the staging that was messed up again, even if I tried to add more stages and correct everything in advance, but yeah, it did not want to work. The lander has a thrust to weight ratio which is bigger than 0.2 or something like that, which is what we need on Dres. The rocket that I used is the same exact one that I used also for the transfer of the previous missions, since we proved that it works. I put obviously the clamshell ×4 for the fairing, because we had that problem in the past in which one of the two halves of the fairing destroyed our spacecraft, and we loaded in, ready to launch. And this is what happened. All the structural connections of the various parts of the rocket were just not loaded in, and so everything was falling apart, and this went on for some long time. And so yeah, the first thing that I tried to do after the rocket fell apart for the first time was going back to the vehicle assembly building and there loading another craft file and trying to see if that would have worked instead of the one that I just launched. And so there we go, I load a previous save, I try and check if everything is correct, launch again, and we get the same exact result. And at this moment I did not realize what was my error. Luckily enough, I had a stream on Twitch by EJSA, which he is the guy that discovered this thing, or from which I saw the problem being the cubic structs, and so I realized that it was that. I remember that he got that a few days prior, and so I could correct. Here I exited the save, reloaded the save, tried to launch again, and guess what? Game got stuck on the loading screen. Yeah, I could not move on from this screen. I was there like for 2 minutes, and so then I had this realization, and so then I could rebuild the rocket. I went back to the vehicle assembly building, changed the structure of the craft without putting the SAS module and the command pod there where I put them previously, and instead I created this other version which has a small command pod, the 1.25 meters one, placed between the engine and the fuel tank at the bottom of the craft. Here I decided that I wanted some more style points for this mission. I figured that we had too much delta V to get simply through to Dres. Therefore, I started my gravity turn a little earlier to try and be a little more efficient, so I started to tilt my rocket gradually towards the east at 20 kilometers from the ground instead of at 30, as this rocket is supposed to do, and therefore my rocket flipped around, and so I had to make some corrections later for how to get into orbit. Luckily enough, we had more than enough delta V on this and the next stages to get all the way to Dres, so I skip what is the orbital injection in an orbit around the sun. Obviously then we have to make the change of inclination to intercept the orbit of Dres, since Kerbin orbits in the ecliptic of the Kerbolar System. Well, I guess that the ecliptic of the Kerbolar System is defined by the orbit of Kerbin, so it is inclinated of 0 degrees, while instead the orbit of Dres is at 5 degrees of inclination relative to Kerbin. That's why we need to make that maneuver there, so create a maneuver plan and change, playing a little bit with all the direction, changing mostly the inclination, but also a little bit the axis of the pericenter and apocenter, periapsis and apoapsis of the orbit of our craft, so that we get an encounter with Dres, and trying to make the two entrance and exit circles here, these clusters of circles that we see on the sphere. Try to make them aligned on the diameter of the sphere of influence, which is this sphere that we see around Dres, to make sure that we are gonna pass as close as possible to the planet, and therefore being with the periapsis at a height which is similar to the one of our space station of the DRSS, the Dres Ring Space Station, that it's there orbiting inside of the rings at an altitude of about 295 kilometers above the surface of Dres. So we just entered the sphere of influence of the planet. This time I did not have to go and search for the maneuver planner button somewhere around the screen on the edges of it. It actually worked there exactly where it was, and so obviously I tried to create this maneuver, reducing the periapsis height, trying to get an encounter, a crossing through the orbital plane of the Dres space station, the Dres Ring Space Station, but at the same time also trying to pass at the lowest inclination as possible. Here I was doing the burn from the spacecraft view, not from the map view, otherwise it was gonna spin around like it did in the previous episodes. By the way, if you didn't saw them, you should go and catch up with the story at where we got from the previous parts. And I noticed by pure sheer luck, opening the Delta V manager, that the upper stage of our transfer vehicle was actually burning through the fuel of the lander. So it was gonna compromise the mission of landing on Dres, because for some reason, even if there were two decouplers with the fuel crossfit deactivated, as you can see there from the screen, between the fuel tank of the lander and the fuel of the second stage, for some reason it was taking the fuel also from there. So as soon as I could, I got rid of that, I refueled the lander and got rid of it, said bye bye without even being happy about it, and ignited that magnificent nuclear staged engine. And we can see there the super ultra hot hydrogen coming out from the nozzle. Let's speed up the time a little, because this maneuver was quite slow being done from the nuclear engine, which does not have the biggest thrust ever. And for one time we did not obtain such a different orbit from the one that we were predicting. I just decided to erase the maneuver plan and make a new correction, a new plan later, to make sure that we arrived and obtained actually an orbit which is the one similar to the one that we are interested in. And then again, as done previously, enter into a highly elliptical orbit that we want to make in the same plane as the target one, so in this case the DRSS, and that's what you can see me doing here. For some reason I had some kind of problems with the next maneuver plan in which the game didn't let me see the actual encounter that I would have got, and therefore I had to struggle a little bit. Here you can see we were very far away between the various encounters, and here instead I'm lowering my orbit to make sure that we are gonna encounter at the encounter 2. In this case it looks like the space station along its orbit with a super high relative velocity of 470 meters per second, which didn't make any sense because our orbit was practically the same, apart for the apoapsis being, I don't know, 100 kilometers higher. And so yeah, I got here, I performed my maneuver, being kind of skeptical of what was gonna happen and not understanding why that value was shown there, and then fine-tuning with the reaction control thrusters to obtain a close encounter, which was closer but still showed that we were super far away. And here then the encounters disappeared. The encounter 1 substituted the encounter 2 and stuff like that. And yeah, I don't know what was going on in the game, in its mind right now, but we were just 10 kilometers away. And actually we were going further away from the target than what we have already been, so probably we had a close encounter where it was indicated just with different relative velocity and relative distance that the game didn't want to let us know that we had previously. And so I had to perform this maneuver, so burning towards the target, I switched to the target relative velocity by clicking there on the nav ball, and we started our approach, going in ever so slowly at 5 meters per second. When about at 1 kilometer away, here I did this flip maneuver and used the nuclear engine to slow down, to bleed out the majority of the velocity, of the relative velocity that we had, and then obviously performed the rendezvous and the docking and approach using the reaction control thrusters to make the smaller adjustments, the finest adjustments of the trajectory. Yeah, I may have lied a little bit. Probably I used the nuclear engine more than what one would do in real life, because otherwise I would be shooting well, irradiated material towards a space station, which might not be the brightest idea. But yeah, I use a little bit more of that with respect to the reaction control thruster, just to make sure to not run out of monopropellant, since we may use that also in the future dockings of the rover, and so it would be a grave mistake to waste it just during the first docking here. Here you can see me switching to the capture camera view that lines up the camera with the orientation of the reaction control thrusters, so that when hitting I, we actually thrust with the RCS to go up, when hitting K we go down, and J and L are left and right respectively. Here I try to line up the front of the docking port with the target docking port. This time around the space station was not wiggling all around as it did in the previous episode, and so we can just go in, dock with it. We went inside of the station for some reason, and that was the camera that put us there, and so we are docked. We have the lander. We can hopefully very soon start the first landing mission. So here we are with the fuel transfer, just to make sure that we have enough delta V, enough change of velocity available in the crew return spacecraft. So I refueled that with the hydrogen from the lander module, and then also transferred some RCS propellant, so some monopropellant from the lander to the main spacecraft, before proceeding with the undocking of the lander, actually of the tag module of the lander, which exploded here, more or less. Oh, actually, no, okay, no, oh no, that was a spoiler of what's gonna happen in the next episode of one of the hundreds of Kraken attacks that we are gonna see also in the next episode. Yeah, because I've already recorded it, and boy oh boy, ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna be crazy too. And so here I decided to extend the antenna, because you can see there just below the nav ball that I had an orange symbol close to the antenna, meaning that we didn't have communication, as if they are needed, I don't know. And so yeah, for this tag module it was the time of departure from the DRSS, and I said, why not try and again make a lander that goes on on Dres in an improvised way. Actually, my first landing on Dres in KSP2 was with the same way, more or less. I created an orbiter which had lots more of delta V than what was required, and so I said, you know what, we may as well try to land. We can do this on Dres because it has a lower gravity, also with respect to the one of the MUN of KSP. Therefore, it's very easy going in for a landing. Also with the nuclear engine here, I was struggling a little bit because I had a finite amount of monopropellant, a very small one, since I transferred it to the station, and we do not have on board a real SAS module, since I had the problem before with the cubic structural parts, and so I just have to rely on the SAS capabilities, on the torque that our command module can give, which is kind of weak, and that's why we are going down without being able to really reorient correctly the the space tag, the upper stage, or however you want to call it. And so yeah, we are not properly doing the best landing ever. By the way, guys, listen to the soundtrack. Like, it's epic when you start going for a landing. You can just hear this music that's pumping you on, that's making you understand that there's something epic going on, that there's something risky, something to which you have to pay attention with respect to the chill vibes instead that you get during a standard flight around space. I mean standard as if it was something super normal to do, flying around space, interplanetary, to build a space station on the other side of the solar system. But yeah, so here I could not turn around, so I could not really go vertical and start a final vertical landing approach, and so we started going sideways with the lander that didn't want to turn around. I was about to run out of reaction control thruster of monopropellant, therefore I didn't wanna use it to flip now, since then we would have risk of overshooting and not having correction monopropellant, some monopropellant to make a correction, and so we started skipping along the surface. By the way, you can see the frame rate getting very low when we are actually actively looking at the surface, and that's one of the problems that the developers assessed in the last few updates that they released on the KSP forums, and that they are gonna try to modify for the next patches that are gonna come out as soon as possible, as they said. Here I kept on traveling, and then I realized that I had activated the functionality of the SIS to automatically point up, so point away from the surface, and that was exactly what was creating my spacecraft to point just above from the surface, and then for not being able of actively slowing down, because I could not point towards the retrograde velocity vector, and so I switched to that. The spacecraft tried very slightly to tilt in that direction, and gave me the opportunity, gave me the chance of slowing down the horizontal velocity, and so we got our first lander of this save file of the Dres Ring Space Station. We touched down softly at about 4-5 meters per second on the surface of Dres, and resting on its antenna we have the first lander on the surface of the planet. And thanks to these improvised secondary objectives, secondary missions that we just did, we discovered that the surface of Dres is actually solid, and that we can try and land on it with an actual lander and bring the kerbals from the DRSS down here. So let's go back to check on them. Where are they and how are they doing? The space station entered in a trajectory that takes it directly onto the surface of the planet, so there is no need of actually using the lander. How cool! So yeah, the space station, which is combined number 12, was on that very weird orbit, and so I had to reload the previous save game, the previous quick save that I had. and guess where it was? It was before the actual docking of the lander to the space station. Therefore, well, we went back again and did perform the more or less same exact maneuvers, which with some slight deviations, again shooting the irradiated hydrogen towards our space station because kerbals do not fear radiations. And as you may notice, there is no rings. They are not here, the rings are not present. I don't know what's the matter with that, but sometimes reloading save files, reloading quick saves, creates this absence of Dres rings. Well, the performance is at least improved a little bit with respect to what it was previously. But in any case, I'm super happy, like getting in orbit in a relatively close to a surface of a planet orbit, getting the FPS that I'm getting, like around 20 FPS, with all these parts, which are obviously, they are not thousands, but they are already hundreds of parts between various crafts, with my hardware that is barely at the minimum limit of the minimum requirements, is very, very cool. Here you can see me getting some cool images, some cool shots to get maybe a screenshot for the thumbnail or stuff like that, or to post on Reddit. And we docked again, we have the lander again, and so we need to transfer the fuel as we did previously, and then also manage the kerbals and put the kerbals inside of the lander, and then we are ready to take the kerbals on the surface of Dres. I was impatient, I wanted to make them land since we proved that we can do that. I'm not gonna bother trying to land again also the transfer vehicle there, and so let's just go check that the kerbals are all together in the lander. Obviously we want to put Jebediah, we want to put Team C, since he is one of the main character kerbals. Here I noticed that moving the kerbals around moves the center of mass of the spacecraft, and so moves where the camera is, and so we undock and they die. Undocking the lander makes, first of all, the lander does not undock, and secondly, kills all the crew. And trying it to click on the other docking port still makes the same result. And so let's reload the save file and try again. Is it gonna work? Guess what? Nope. And so that night I ran out of ideas. I didn't know what to do, and I said, you know what, I'm not gonna bother doing something more than just trying to reload the game, check on again if we can get the kerbals out of here, if we can try to undock and start a landing sequence. So I reloaded the game. I was about to try again. In the meantime, I went to the toilet. I was checking my phone. I don't know what was happening, and yeah, the space station started to spin on its own, faster and faster as the time went by. So well, let's try again now to undock, just by pausing the game, so slowing down time to 0, and then trying to undock the spacecraft, trying to undock the lander in this condition just to check what was going on. But as you can see, it's going faster and faster, seriously, without ever stopping, until now that I don't know what happened there. It started to spin in the other direction. Time pause, clicked on the spacecraft, trying to undock the lander, and still the kerbals died. Therefore I stopped here for the night. I couldn't be bothered to redock again, to try another time. I just reloaded the save once more, and the result was still the same. And so with this shot of the space station in a high orbit around Dres when it got teleported there by the Kraken, I wanna thank you for getting until the end of the video. I hope that you may consider subscribing for the next episodes, and if you didn't see the previous ones, just go and check them out. There's gonna be the link to the playlist here on screen. And thanks so much for watching. I'm gonna catch every one of you the next time. Take care. Bye bye.